Welcome to MacStories Unwind, a weekly review of everything MacStories and more. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, we had another big week at MacStories. We've got a lot to run through. We're going to do it relatively quickly, but of course, we ought to start right at the top with your iPad Air review, because you had a chance to get a review unit and put it through its paces. And what are kind of the big picture conclusions from your review that you want to share with people?
Yes. So I've been able to test it for a few days before the embargo time. And of course, the iPad Air came out today on Friday. So here's what you should know. This is basically the 11-inch iPad Pro without some Pro features. And of course, because of that, it's got it's more affordable, as Apple would say. It's cheaper.
Right.
So the iPad Air literally looks like the 11-inch iPad Pro. And if you didn't know where to look, you would easily confuse them. The only difference, it's a 10.9-inch display instead of an 11-inch display. This means, in practice, a 28-pixel difference in terms of resolution. These are basically the same iPads. And as far as the software is concerned, iPadOS 14 behaves the same way on the iPad Air as it does on the 11-inch iPad Pro. Multi-column, multi-window, the home screen, same layouts, same style of multitasking. The iPad Air obviously comes with the A14 Bionic, but it's not the Pro version of that chip. So the difference between the iPad Pro and the iPad Air can be mostly felt in performance, and especially in multi-core performance. It's kind of a funny situation where the iPad Air, because of the A14 Bionic, beats very easily in single-core performance the 11-inch iPad Pro or the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. However, because of the A12Z architecture, and this is also true of the A12X if you have a 2018 iPad Pro, those Pro-optimized systems on a chip, they beat in multi-core performance the A14 Bionic. So as I argued in my review, it'll be interesting to see what Apple does when the A14X eventually comes out. The iPad Air doesn't have Face ID, one of the differences between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. It has Touch ID, and it has a new flavor of Touch ID, which is Touch ID built into the top button. And as I argued in my story, this is surprisingly fine. Like, it requires, if you're coming from a previous generation iPad Air or a base model iPad with Touch ID in the home button, takes minimal adjustment, and you still can enjoy this new edge-to-edge display design, but you don't have Face ID. You just have Touch ID in the home button, in the top button, and it works fine. It's fast, it's reliable. Obviously, as someone who's used to the iPad Pro, I prefer Face ID, right? I prefer to sit in front of my iPad Pro,
sure, press
the spacebar on my Magic Keyboard, and the whole thing unlocks automatically. With the iPad Air, you won't have that option, but I think Touch ID is fine. You can use the second generation Apple Pencil. You can use the Magic Keyboard. You don't have, on the other hand, a promotion display. That's another of those differences between the iPad Pro and the iPad Air. So I think overall, as I concluded in my story, I believe this is the new default iPad. This is the iPad that the vast majority of people should consider before going the iPad Pro route. Apple is opening up, is democratizing a lot of previously Pro-only features. So the liquid retina display, the industrial design, the second generation pencil, the Magic Keyboard, right? All of these features used to be exclusive to the iPad Pro. Now they're also available on the iPad Air. And arguably, those are the essentials, right? Those are the core features that make the iPad Pro experience. And sure, the iPad Pro still has some extras that justify the existence of a Pro line, such as ProMotion, such as a LiDAR scanner, the ultra-wide camera, and a bigger version with the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. But really, I think the gap between the iPad Air and the 11-inch iPad Pro is now very small. And I think for most people, this is the iPad they should consider. And I think if this is the case right now, I think it'll be really fascinating to see what Apple does in future versions of the iPad Pro. Because as I concluded in the review, Apple just raised the baseline for the iPad family, for the iPad lineup. And maybe this allows them to go in a different, maybe even higher end direction with the iPad Pro.
Right, right. Absolutely. Also this week, Federico, I reviewed Halide Mark II, which is the second version of the very popular pro photography app for the iPhone by Halide. And it there's a lot going on in this app. I think to kind of try to summarize what they've done is they have redone the UI. I love the Halide UI already, but now it's even simpler. There are a lot of little interesting design affordances that are there to really help you along in learning how to use a pro camera app, because the camera stuff can get complicated very, very fast when you're talking about all the different settings and manual mode and raw photography and all that. But I think the design does a great job here of helping you along in learning that if you're new to it, but also doesn't really get in your way if you already know that stuff and are comfortable with it. So that's a big advantage of this update. On top of that, there are new ways to handle raw photography that I think simplifies it quite a bit. There's a new feature called coverage that allows you to capture back-to-back versions of a raw image and a JPEG. And the advantage of doing it this way is that the JPEG that's captured has all the computational photography power that Apple offers behind it. So things like Smart HDR and Deep Fusion are available for that image. That's not true if you take a RAW and a JPEG simultaneously. So this allows the best of both worlds. The downside, of course, is that because those shots are happening back to back, it takes a little longer. So you got to hold your camera a little longer and a little steadier to make sure you get both of those. But it's an interesting solution that I think is going to work a lot better for a lot of people. Beyond that, I guess the reviewer, which is where you go to look at your shots that you've taken, has been updated. It's a lot easier to use. There's more EXIF metadata there available for you. Plus, with your raw images, there's something called Instant RAW, which applies 17 adjustments to a raw image to punch them up and make them look nice. And it might not be exactly what you want, but it's definitely a good starting point where you can use Instant RAW, export out to a third-party editor, and then take the editing process from there, saving you a lot of time. So great app, definitely worth checking out.
Reader 5 came out a few days ago. This is a major new update to the popular RSS client by Silvio Rizzi, which has been around forever. One of the first apps that I ever reviewed on MacStories, I believe in 2009. So first year of the website. The new version has a native 3-column layout on iPadOS 14, which I absolutely love. And it adds support for tagging in the Read Later account. So if you want to use Reader as a Read Later app in addition to an RSS client, you can now tag your articles. And of course, all this tagging is also accessible via the Shortcuts integration that Reader used to have before. And now you can combine that and put together some really interesting actions. There's also widgets for iOS and iPadOS 14, and you can configure those widgets. So you can pick a specific folder or feed, or for example, you can put together a Read Later widget that you can filter articles by tag or by search. It's really fascinating. It's really well done. Excellent example of the widget configurability in iOS 14. And there's also, I don't use these myself, but there's also the ability to finally sync your RSS feeds via iCloud instead of a third-party service. So, John, you covered this in your review. The different options that you have for syncing and data saving features with iCloud in Reader 5.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you can have full syncing turned on everywhere if you want, right, where anytime you sync, everything gets downloaded to the device you're on, or you can just basically sync the differences. Now, for that to work, you really need an always-on app somewhere that is handling the downloads of your RSS feeds. So, for instance, if you have Reader running on a Mac and you have it set to download every 5 minutes, which is, I think, the shortest period of time, then on your iPhone, for instance, you could set it to only sync the differences. And the advantage of that is faster syncing and less data use if you're on a mobile network.
Nice. Yeah. So, I don't know, Silvio got me again, and I've been using Reader 5 again. It's just so polished, and the animations and the transitions and the little touches. Reader as, as that kind of polish and in a way sort of like magic that I never find in any other RSS app. It's just so good and smooth, and yeah, you should check it out because it's really, really, really well done.
Yeah, I'm back to using it full time now myself too. So
it just feels like, using Reader, it always reminds me of Shigeru Miyamoto quote about from decades ago about how when you're playing a Mario game, the magic that you feel is that controlling Mario should almost feel like an extension of your hands, where the wall between you as a person and your hands pressing buttons almost disappears in a way that Mario jumping and running feels like you are doing that, right? And using Reader feels like that. It just feels so intuitive. It just feels like my fingers are actually touching RSS feeds. I don't know how to describe it. It's super well done.
All right. I have a couple other stories that I wrote this week that I want to touch on. One is Adobe Max happened this week, and that's Adobe's big annual conference. And one of the highlights was more Adobe apps on the iPad. Illustrator was unveiled for the first time, and I had a chance to work with the beta for a while, and it's an amazing app. I mean, this is really as high a pro level iPad app as you can get. There's an amazing amount of stuff you can do here. I know people who use Illustrator on the desktop will say, yeah, but, and that there are things missing. That is true. That was very true with Photoshop too, but I think this one is more sophisticated than Photoshop was out of the box, and I think the touch interactions are particularly good and really well suited towards this sort of app. Of course, there were also updates to Photoshop and Lightroom, and Fresco, which is a drawing and painting app from Adobe, came to the iPhone for the first time. And I didn't have a lot of time to play with this, but I played with it a little bit, and it works surprisingly well. I mean, you're using your finger and not an Apple Pencil, so there's definitely going to be a lack of precision there. But especially if you're doing kind of bigger, if you're using it like with a paintbrush to paint the sky or something that's not fine detail type of work, it's definitely doable on an iPhone, and the app is very good on the iPad as well. The other story that I wrote this week was a hands-on with intercom, music alarms on the HomePod, and new Siri tricks. And boy, the intercom thing is a little complicated right now because Apple had an event where they said it was going to work on the HomePod and all of your devices other than the Mac, of course. That's the footnote. But in the release of 14.1, it only works with HomePod. So right now, and the Mini's not out yet. So if you own more than one of the original HomePods, you can try this if you have 14.1 on your iPad or iPhone, and you can broadcast from one HomePod to another or from one HomePod to several HomePods. And with 14.2, that will get expanded. The Home app will actually have a button in it where if you're viewing a room in your home that has a HomePod in it, you can tap the button. It's like a little waveform button in the corner, and that lets you record an audio message that will then play on the HomePod. I think it's kind of a neat feature. I'm really keen to try it with CarPlay too. So that should be a lot of fun.
Very nice.
Music alarms on the HomePod, also nicely done. You can set the volume independently of the volume on your HomePod for the alarm, which is really great because, maybe you're playing loud music the night before and you've set yourself an alarm to wake up in the morning, and you won't have to peel yourself off the ceiling when it, is playing at 90%. You can set it at a nice quiet level and pick a song or a radio station or a playlist to start playing when the alarm goes off. And then, of course, Siri has some new tricks too, where if you ask your HomePod for some information that's only available on the web, that can be sent to your phone. And also with locations, if you have information about a location, such as directions, then you can, it gets sent to your phone as a Siri suggestion. I tried that for a local restaurant, and it worked just as advertised. I asked about the restaurant, opened up my phone a few seconds later, and there was a Siri suggestion with directions on how to get there.
Very nice. I should try that, even though I'm not going around much these days. What else is new this week? Apple Music TV. So Apple has basically launched MTV in the United States, right?
Right.
So this is a new Apple Music TV channel. Is it a channel in the TV app? Is it like a? I don't have it, John. So you gotta tell me what it's like.
It's a very good question because I haven't tried it on my Apple TV.
I can use it. I'm in Italy, so
it is in the TV. It is in the TV app, so it is like a channel, I guess. Yes.
Okay.
And you can also access it through the music app on an iPhone or an iPad.
Very nice. Well, if you're in the United States and they
Yes.
play music videos and stuff, but yeah, I can only use it with a VPN, and I don't want to leave a VPN on all day for what is essentially MTV. So.
All right, Federico, I should mention, too, that we had 2 episodes of App Stories this week. The first one was talking about some of the apps that were highlighted in the Apple event from what seems like a million years ago, but was really only a little over a week. And we concentrated there primarily on the Home app and the Camera app. And then midweek, we did an episode all about your iPad Air reviews. So if you want to learn more, if you'd rather listen to us talk about it, and Federico primarily talk about it, instead of reading his review, you can do that too. And then on the club, this week we have a new favorite, which is Keep, which Ryan covered. I did a collection that was a little different than some of our collections in that I covered 3 different technologies that I think will have an impact in the future that aren't really being used heavily by Apple right now. Things like the U1 chip, for instance. So that was kind of fun to do. And then, of course, alongside the iPad Air review this week, Sylvia Gatta had put together some new wallpapers for the iPad, which Federico mentioned. And those wallpapers are there and available to club members, so definitely download those. They're very similar and widget-friendly in the same way that the iPhone ones from the week before were, so check those out too. All right, Federico, let me tell you about our sponsor this week, and that is SaneBox. SaneBox is a server-side email service that filters your email and makes sure that only the most important messages hit your inbox. That's really important because, we all get so much email, and with something like SaneBox, it's super simple to be organized automatically. It includes filtering so that only the most important things hit your inbox, and then the rest of the things go into dedicated folders that you can look at whenever you have time. Things like the Sane News folder for newsletters, for instance, or Sane Later, which is just less important email. And then there's even something called the Sane Black Hole, which is better than unsubscribing to emails. If you get on a list and you don't want to be on it anymore, just drag it into the Sane Black Hole and you'll never have to see it again. You can even use SaneBox as a reminder service, sending yourself reminders that show up in your inbox, or which is really cool, you can BCC a special email address that will allow that message to show back up in your inbox if the person you're replying to doesn't respond within a certain number of days. A great way to make sure things don't slip through the cracks. It's fully server-side, and what that means is you're not going to have to sign up for a new email service or download and install software. It's all just taken care of for you, so it's not a problem at all. Check out sanebox.com/appstories to learn more about this incredible service and to get a special $25 off offer for listeners of this show. Again, that's sanebox.com/MacStories. Our thanks to SaneBox for their support of Unwind and all of MacStories this week. All right, Federico, let's run through our Unwind picks. A little something to listen to this weekend, It seems like.
Yes, I have a very quick music pick. So this is an EP by an indie rock band called Hodera, which came out a few months ago. It's called You're Worth It. So I was familiar with Hodera before because I listened to their 2018 EP called Besides that I discovered, I think, via Spotify or some other source a few years ago. And this new EP, You're Worth It, it's really good. It's like 5 songs. And what I like about this band is that it's indie rock mixed with some post-rock elements, mixed with some sort of like Americana influences. It's they do really peculiar music, and it's, if you're like me, sort of like at the crossroads of those music genres, I think you should enjoy this EP. It reminds me in a way of of Moving Mountains work from a few years ago. Moving Mountains being one of my favorite post-rock and alternative rock bands. They're no longer together, unfortunately. But Hodera, I struggle to describe their genre. Besides, it's indie rock and post-rock and Americana all mixed together. So give it a listen. It's on Apple Music. It's on all the streaming services, and it's relatively quick. And I really like the second song on the EP called Autumn. So go check it out.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to check it out. I'm not familiar with them. My pick is a music pick as well, and that's Serpentine Prison by Matt Berninger. He's the lead singer of The National, which is one of my favorite bands, right? And his solo efforts tend to be kind of a little mellower type music. It's this is a great album. I don't know really how to describe it, but a few of my favorite tracks on here are Distant Access and 1 Second More, along with the title track, which is Serpentine Prison. Really great, kind of relaxing, mellow music. Great to put on in the background while I'm working, for instance. So if you like The National and if you're familiar with Matt Berninger, check it out, because it came out last Friday, I think, and it's quite good. All right, Federico, that's it for another episode of Unwind. We got through an awful lot in just like 20 some minutes, so that's a pretty good quick review and rundown for everything that happened in a whole week. So you can find me and Federico, of course, over on MacStories.net. Federico also is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Fetici. That's VITICCI. And I am John Voorhees, at John Voorhees, in fact. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.